The Housing Finance and Policy Committee will come to order, and I will note this meeting is taking place under House Rule 10.01. Ms. Hirsch, please take the roll.
Chair Hausman?
Present.
Hausman, present. Vice Chair Howard? Representative Tice?
Tice present.
Tice, present. Representative Agbaje?
Present.
Agbaje, present. Representative Bliss?
Bliss present.
Bliss, present. Representative Gomez?
Gomez present.
Gomez, present. Representative Hassan?
Hassan is here.
Hassan, present. Representative Heinrich?
Heinrich present.
Heinrich, present. Representative Herr?
Present.
Herr, present. Representative Jurgens?
Jurgens present.
Jurgens, present. Representative Olson?
Present.
Olson, present. Representative Barr?
Barr present.
Barr, present. Representative Ryer?
Ryer present.
Ryer, present. And Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item of business is approval of the minutes from Tuesday, March 22. Representative Olson, have you had a chance to review those minutes?
I have, Madam Chair, and I move the minutes.
Members, any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, please unmute yourselves for a voice vote. All those in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the minutes are approved. Our first vote was going to be with Representative Agbaje, but her testifier has not yet arrived. I think there's some technical difficulties. So instead, members, the next bill on the agenda is my bill. So I will hand the virtual gavel over to Representative Gomez. I should note Representative Howard is in the Education Committee because he's the first bill up there. So I am handing the virtual gavel over to Representative Gomez for the hearing of House File 4405.
Thank you, Chair Hausman. So the chair moves that the House File 4405 be laid over. Representative Hausman, you have an author's amendment to your bill. Would you like to adopt the A1 amendment before you proceed?
Yes, I will move the A1 amendment to get the bill in the author's desired shape.
Excellent. Will you explain your amendment briefly?
Justin Cope from House Research found an ambiguity. These things sometimes happen. And the amendment clarifies which projects would need to meet the different requirements. I believe Mr. Cope is here, and if you have questions, could say more if members have any other questions.
Thank you, Representative Hausman. Does anyone have a question about the amendment? I'm not seeing any. So all those, if we could unmute for a moment, all those in favor of adopting the A1 amendment, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Representative Hausman to House File 4405 as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, we have been doing our committee work this year, and we've certainly heard a lot about the need for funding, especially housing infrastructure bonds, which are our state's lifeline to many of our nonprofit housing developers. Along with these precious resources, which you have heard about all session and that we hope to significantly boost this year in our budget, there have been many great ideas about how to improve upon the criteria used by MHFA when making funding decisions for projects seeking HIB funding. Given the housing crisis facing our state, we must make sure that we provide those who are developing affordable housing not only the funding they need, but also new tools and flexibility to maximize the impact of these state investments. Today, we will hear about a bill that AON has been working on. AON, one of our state's largest nonprofit housing developers, has been contemplating affordable housing developments with a mix of affordability levels. I should just say, by the way, one of our testifiers for a later bill today is the new president and CEO of AON. I had not met him until we were on the screen this morning, and I'm certainly looking forward to the opportunity to hear from him today. As I said, the work of this bill is AON's suggestion bringing it to us. Madam Chair, that's the bill. I have a testifier.
Thank you so much. I have one testifier signed up from AON, Sarah Harris, and I'm also excited to meet the new leadership at AON. There's some big shoes to fill, but we hear great things. So we're excited to move forward together in partnership as we have been in it for many years. So Ms. Harris, if you wanted to just identify yourself briefly and go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you so much. I too am very excited about our new leader at Aon, but that's not why I'm here to testify today. So, thank you, Madam Chair. I am Sarah Harris. I'm the Executive Vice President of Strategy, Partnerships, and Production at Aon, which means I do lead our housing development team and acquisition team. By way of background, Aon is a nonprofit owner, developer, and manager of nearly 6,000 affordable units in Minnesota. We were actually founded in the 1980s after years of urban renewal in downtown Minneapolis, including the construction of the then new Minneapolis Convention Center, removed thousands of affordable housing units. And sadly, since then, our housing crisis statewide has only continued to grow through the loss of existing units, the naturally occurring affordable units that the chair referred to earlier, as well as the constrained resources of funding for development for new affordable homes. So I'm here today with gratitude to you, to everybody on this committee for hearing so many bills this session that deal with Minnesota's housing crisis. Your commitment to funding NOAA and your target for housing infrastructure bonds, together with bills to make housing infrastructure bonds more useful, are critically important. We in the nonprofit housing world salute you and your committee for the work you're doing to understand that not one size fits all for every community. Like you, we believe that the current housing crisis demands that we pursue new and creative ways to produce more affordable homes for families and individuals in our community. HF 4405 proposes to add yet another tool to our collective toolbox. Let me talk a little bit about that. This proposed bill addresses the need to imagine affordable housing developments with multiple levels of affordability within a single development, and the current HIB statute does not allow us to do that. HF 4405 keeps the focus of HIBs on serving the lowest income households while also giving us the flexibility to create opportunities for more affordable housing. It allows us to carve out units for lower income households in a project where rents received from higher levels of affordability will help to close the gap on available funding. The current HIB statute does not allow us to do that. I'd like to say in simple terms that when you can get more 30s when you pair them with the 50s and 60s in the affordable housing vernacular, meaning you're going to get more deeply affordable units if you can build them with the affordable workforce housing. This bill would create a floor that requires a certain amount, both by the quantity of units and the percentage of deeply affordable units to be included in any HIB project to ensure that they are in fact used only on affordable housing projects for the long term. We also want to make sure that they are not just an add-on to larger market rate projects. So the bill caps the upper limit of affordability at 80% of the area median income. Lastly, while the bill provides some flexibility for the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency when scoring projects, it keeps the priority where it should be, and that is for projects that are providing those most deeply supportive units at 30% of the area median income or less. We believe this bill has widespread appeal, both in the metro area as well as in greater Minnesota. It will allow for large and small developments that need a mix of affordability levels to meet the local needs and also to help make the projects financially viable. Here are just a couple of quick ways where more flexibility in HIBs could help deliver the needed affordable housing for people in our state. For example, a large core city site that can deliver a much needed volume of housing, so up to 500 units, but it can only be successful if it has both enough units and rents to reduce the gap in building the project and operating it. There simply aren't enough rental supports for a property of this scale. And secondly, we need a mix of residents on a project of this scale because we all can agree that 500 supportive units in one location doesn't create a quality environment for anybody. It would neither be good for the residents or for the surrounding community. Equally important, this new bill would work well in a small town site where a market study shows that there's a need for 50 to 75 affordable homes, but only 10 of those homes are needed in the most deeply affordable income levels, and the other homes would serve the workforce in that community. In closing, I'd also like to thank our colleagues at the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency with whom we have been working on this language and continue to do so. So with that, I thank everybody here and I welcome any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Harris. Members, are there any questions for the testifier or for the bill author? I'm not seeing anyone. We'll give it just a moment though. All right. Representative Hausman, do you have any final comments on your bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just appreciate your attention to the issue and look forward to more conversation with Aon.
Perfect. Thank you. House File 4405 as amended is laid over. And with that, I'll hand the fake gavel back over to Chair Hausman.
Thank you, Representative Gomez, for your help. Mr. Worth, is David McGee in or Mike Howard in?
Madam Chair, David McGee is on the call, so we are ready to go for Representative Agbaje's bill.
Wonderful. So then we'll take up House File 3971, sheet authored by Representative Agbaje. The chair moves that House File 3971 be laid over. Representative Agbaje, please proceed with your bill presentation.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. So as we have heard many times, having stable housing is a fundamental basic need. We know that too many people are facing the detrimental effects of housing insecurity, and home ownership is part of creating more stability for a family. Owning a home addresses the need for safe, secure, and dignified housing. We know it leads to improvements in education, economic stability, and health. Owning a home is one way families can build generational wealth in this country. So this bill aims to support home ownership efforts across the state by a strong community organization known as Build Wealth Minnesota. Build Wealth Minnesota has worked with communities of color since at least 2004 to provide educational programs and loan services to families seeking home ownership. The current funding request of $10 million is for a robust and aggressive campaign to close the racial disparity gap in Minnesota. The fund from this grant will be used to leverage current partners and supports from banks and other local organizations who work with Build Wealth to help families of color obtain home ownership. The funding would support bringing 9,000 families of color into homes in the next 5 to 7 years. The goal of this program is to help bring down the racial home ownership gap in Minnesota, which, as we've heard in this committee, is the 5th largest gap in the country. So here with me today is Build Wealth Minnesota CEO David McGee to describe more about the project and the timely need for this bill.
So members, we're joined by a testifier, David McGee, Executive Director of Build Wealth Minnesota. Welcome to the committee, and please identify yourself for the record.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is David McGee, and I am the Executive Director of Build Wealth Minnesota. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. First, I just want to let you know I've been in banking for 39 years. Telling my age a little bit, but I've been helping families for the last 20. I came out of the corporate world and decided to make it my life's work to help families learn about financial education and to avoid predatory lending practices and to build wealth. And so in 2004, me and 7 other people, we founded Build Wealth Minnesota. We're currently a HUD-approved counseling agency and a HUD-approved lender. We are a community development financial institution. It's called a CDFI, which is a designation from the U.S. Department of Treasury. We're also a local initiative support corporation financial opportunity center. And what we do is we provide kind of a comprehensive approach to helping families with comprehensive financial education, workforce readiness, and a number of things of helping people get stable. Our primary program is the Family Stabilization Plan, where we take families through a very comprehensive 2-year approach of financial education, coaching, and linking them to resources to get them out of breaking them out of the cycles of poverty. We had presented our family stabilization plan program to Minnesota Housing 2014, and they operationalized the program, which is now the homeownership capacity program. And there are 24 organizations statewide that are actually utilizing the method and the kind of framework of our family stabilization plan program. And so we're actually getting, thank you very much. We've been getting a state appropriation for the last 5 years. But here since 2005, Build Wealth has been aggressively and deliberately trying to address the disparity gap here in Minnesota. And I know the representative has stated we're the fifth. We've been hovering in the top 3 spots as the worst in terms of the disparity gaps between white families and Black families here in America. Minneapolis, when I first started in 2005, the home ownership rate for Black families was 31%. Here in Minneapolis, it's 19% and 16% in the city of St. Paul. And so at this point, the gap has been widening. Build Wealth has been successful through our program and our strategies of getting over 3,000 families in the home ownership over the last 10 years. And so last year, we started working on an initiative to try to close the disparity gap by 15% using some of the systems that we had already been using and partnering with a number of other organizations. We wanted to see if we could close that disparity gap by 15%. We wouldn't be last, but at least we would set it on a pathway to closing the disparity gap. We began to partner and put together some strategies together. And we started replicating our services in several other communities around the state, where now we have some folks delivering it in St. Cloud, Rochester, Burnsville, Bloomington, St. Paul, and some of the other southern metro areas of the Twin Cities. We've been doing a great job getting people prepared. We started pulling a number of stakeholders together. We've got the city of Minneapolis stepped in, U.S. Bank, Bremer Bank, Wells Fargo, and Bremer has agreed to purchase $90 million of loans. So we started years ago a targeted pool of mortgage-backed type of products that would be a little more culturally sensitive than the existing products that are on the marketplace. I know that I've been an underwriter in banking for about 30 years, and an underwriter is a person who decides whether you'll get a mortgage. And underwriting criteria has been the same for about 80 years. It hasn't changed. It's basically the same guideline. Well, very many Black families and families of color purchasing homes 80 years ago. And so there's the need to have a little bit cultural sensitivity in some of the lending practices. And so we had come up with a targeted pool back in 2014, and Minnesota Housing helped us fund that particular operation called Targeted Mortgage Opportunity Program. And a similar product is now at Habitat for Humanity. And so what we're trying to do is revive that particular program and help folks that are in Section 8 get off of Section 8 and use their voucher to actually purchase homes. So today we're looking for your assistance to supporting this bill, because we've gotten a lot of support so far. A lot of funders have gone forward to help us get some traction with this 9,000 equities. And we're seeking support of $10 million to kind of help solidify that loan pool so that we can get more families into home ownership. And we thank you for the opportunity to testify and talk about this today. And I'd be open for any questions if there are any, Madam Chair.
Members, are there questions for the testifier or the bill author? Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. McGee, for your great testimony, and to Representative Agbaje for bringing this forward. I just have been reading the news lately, and so your partnership with Wells Fargo just kind of caught my attention. A few things. I guess the latest offense by Wells Fargo is, they're being sued right now because, I think there have been like historically low lending rates. And so a lot of people have been trying to refinance their homes during this time. some analysis revealed that less than half of the Black homeowners who have applied for refinance through Wells Fargo have been approved, while it's over 70% for white homeowners. There's been some disparity, it seems like, across the industry in those refinance rates, but Wells Fargo's is particularly egregious. During the mortgage crisis, actually the Center for Metropolitan Opportunity mapped their deployment of subprime mortgages geographically, and kind of overlaid that with race in our metro area in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And Wells Fargo was targeting BIPOC communities, low income communities with these subprime mortgages. So I guess I just I wanted to bring that up because it's some of these lenders have contributed to and created the circumstances that your work is trying to undo and push back against. And so I guess I just, I wanted to hear what your thought was about working with them, about, how it is that you think that they can repair the damage that they've done to our communities, because they have damaged our community very profoundly, and it's sort of reflected in data. So yeah, I just was wondering if you had any thoughts about that. Thank you.
Mr. McGee, any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, Madam Chair, and Representative Gomez, I appreciate that. We have been working with Wells Fargo and several other banks here to participate in what we're doing. They haven't stepped up to the plate at the level that we're hoping. We're still looking for more. I know that Bush Foundation and LIST, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, and several others have put in very hefty amounts of money, including Burma. Wells Fargo really needs to do more. They need to invest a lot more. I've been having this conversation with leaders of Wells Fargo and others that this is one of the biggest footprints of Wells Fargo. And I worked for Wells Fargo when they were Northwestern, and they changed their name to Norwest. And they've gained a great deal of wealth for their bank here in this area. And they have consistently had held the record for the number of residential mortgages that they've done in the world. They do more residential mortgages in the world, and we have the worst disparity gaps like right in their backyard. And so we are consistently knocking on their door and asking for Wells Fargo to do more. I'm hoping that with the recent press they've gotten and exposure to some of their practices, that maybe this may be just what they need to invest more in this. I don't want to disparage them at this time as they're one of our funders, but they do have to do more. And so we're consistently asking them to do more. And I guess we're consistently being deliberate about letting them know their challenges and where their shortcomings are. And thus they put in a little money into the project so far. And we are actually knowing that people are still running into challenges with discrimination on getting loans. Thus, we believe the targeted mortgage that we're asking for support from you right now is necessary, because banks are still making it difficult and creating barriers to access lending in a time where rates are going up and the values of houses are going up at an alarming rate.
Members? Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Gomez.
I just wanted to say thank you, and I really appreciate your efforts to hold them accountable for the damage that they've done and for the predatory extraction that they have visited on our communities. It's disappointing to hear that they have not stepped up in a way that's proportional to the harm that they've caused. I guess I feel like efforts like yours help to launder their reputation in a way. I mean, that's not to disparage your work, but it's to say that it's an acknowledgement that they know they have work to do. and that we want them to really step up in a big way. Their mortgage campus is in Representative Hausman's district, and that's one of the communities that they have visited the most harm on. So I just wanted to say thank you for kind of keeping them accountable to what they've done to our communities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, are there other questions for the testifier or the bill author? I'm just going to give it a minute for seeing any hands raised. I don't see any. So Representative Agbaje, final comments on the bill.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. And also want to say thank you so much to Representative Gomez. I think that's really important that we bring up the challenges that we're facing in this area, and that we are doing our best to make sure that we are supporting organizations and community groups that are focused on pushing back on those challenges. And so I hope that we can consider this bill as we move forward with the rest of the session, as we continue to work to make home ownership a reality for more Minnesotans. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Agbaje. House File 3971 as amended is laid over. Mr. Worth, is Representative Howard back yet?
Madam Chair, Representative Howard's bill is still being heard in Education Finance. He should be here in a few minutes, but our testifiers are ready to go. We have a PowerPoint presentation that I believe Mr. Hansen is ready to.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. So we'll go back to Representative Howard when he's here, but for now we'll hear from the testifiers on House File 443. And the first one up is Warren Hansen, President and CEO of Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Warren Hansen. I'm the President and CEO of Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. We're a nonprofit intermediary that has financed over 18,000 units of affordable housing throughout all 87 counties of Minnesota, including, of course, the Metro and Greater Min over the past 27 years. We make capital investments in affordable housing in close coordination with Minnesota Housing, local governments, and nonprofit and for-profit developers, including a growing number of developers of color like Chris Webley, who you will hear from as one of the testifiers in just a few minutes. We're grateful for the work of this committee and the incredible commitment this committee and its leadership has shown over the years and this year to affordable housing. And we're also grateful to the governor's leadership to include $100 million in his budget recommendation for housing stabilization, also known as NOAA preservation. This bill seeks to build on the governor's recommendation by seeking $150 million compared to the $100 million the governor proposed for fiscal years 2022 and 2023, and adding NOAA funding to the base. NOAA preservation is still an option and still a very valuable opportunity for us relative to the Minnesota housing market, but it is financially out of reach in markets on the East Coast and the West Coast because of the national housing shortage, speculation, and rising prices that have essentially made NOAA unaffordable in those markets. But we can't let this happen in Minnesota. We still have time to act. And this bill will help prevent hardship and displacement and evictions and homelessness that result when this NOAA housing is lost. This NOAA preservation bill will provide much needed gap financing on a consistent and predictable multi-year basis and will enable our affordable housing system to go to work and preserve thousands of affordable properties over the next several years. What I'd like to do now is just share my screen and give you a quick overview, of the bill and the plan for the bill. Here we are. So the bill is to preserve the affordability of our existing rental homes and would provide $150 million for NOAA preservation in 22 and 23 and add NOAA funding to the base that would save 10,000 affordable homes over the next 3 bienniums. This is a chart that basically lays out the funding schedule that we're proposing. Initially, $150 million for 2022 and 2023, with $50 million a year added to the base in the out years. And the cumulative units funded would grow to 10,000 units of NOAA preservation preserved over the next 3 bienniums. Every year, Minnesota loses more affordable homes than we build. This chart looks like it's upside down, and the situation is upside down because the red bars on this chart show the losses on an annual basis that have occurred since 2013. And we have lost 52,000 units during this period of time in the metro alone. That's averaging to be 6,500 units per year that we are losing. We are only producing a little over 1,000 units a year, or 7,700 units during the same period that we lost 52,000 units. So Minnesota needs to preserve NOAA housing now. There is a gap in the cost of NOAA housing that is the result of these rising prices of rental properties when they're sold to speculators, sold to investors. And the real acquisition costs are creeping up into the 160 to 180 range right now. And what people can actually afford is back in the cost category of $100,000 per unit, $120,000 per unit. And so this bill will help fill that gap, make the rehab possible, make the acquisition, strategic acquisition possible to save these units from loss of affordability. NOAA is a statewide issue. NOAA preservation affects everywhere, almost everywhere in the whole state. There's approximately 150,000 families at risk who are living in NOAA housing who have incomes below 60% AMI. Now, I want to underscore that this is coming from CoStar data, which is a very reliable and nationally used database of rental properties. However, it undercounts the actual number of rental properties by about 50% because it does not pick up on the smaller properties. So we assume that this map would be much more peppered with the availability to preserve NOAA assets throughout the state. But this is just giving you a picture of what the statewide NOAA data tells us. It's just to zero in on a few cities real quickly. Rochester has NOAA properties throughout its community, concentrated around the Mayo Clinic, actually, and around downtown, and then going north a little bit. About 3,600 families' homes are at risk in Rochester, NOAA properties. This is a great example of a NOAA property that was preserved in Rochester by the Rochester Area Foundation and the First Homes Organization in Rochester. And consider this, they only had to pay $89,000 per unit total cost to preserve this property. This is about 1/3 of the cost of new construction. And it preserved 36 2-bedroom family units, critical workforce housing in Rochester, $900 a month rents that are really essential to the workforce in a community like Rochester. And we need to do more of that in communities like Rochester. Duluth has an enormous number of older rental properties in the Hillside neighborhood. You can see that kind of in the orange dots here around the harbor there in Duluth, and also in West Duluth. If you're familiar with West Duluth, it's an area that is getting reinvestment and somewhat gentrifying, and more and more NOAA properties are at risk in Duluth as well. St. Cloud, you'll hear from Deanna Hemish from Central Minnesota Housing Partnership shortly. St. Cloud has a lot of NOAA properties. They're being sold quickly, hard to compete to acquire those, and about 6,500 NOAA homes are at risk in St. Cloud. And lastly, Moorhead similarly has over 3,200 NOAA properties that are at risk. And I guess Mankato is in the picture here too, with over 2,400 NOAA properties that are at risk in Mankato. So it is a statewide issue. The really remarkable thing about this market rate naturally affordable property that makes up about 80% of all the affordable housing stock in the state of Minnesota and nationally, it actually serves very low income households, as we know anecdotally, but the data shows that about 94% of the households actually have incomes below 60% AMI, 81% have incomes below 50% AMI, and nearly half have incomes below 30% AMI. And these are the households that are most at risk of displacement and homelessness. As was mentioned earlier, the lack of home ownership is a real equity issue in Minnesota. And that means that NOAA housing is very much essential to preserve for the vast number of households of color that rent. Just by way of example, I think as was indicated earlier, only 24% of the African-American households are actually homeowners, 75% are renters. So you can see how the vast majority of African-American households are renting and are affected by the loss of NOAA properties. Real quickly, the point has been made many times that we can preserve NOAA properties at half the cost of new construction. So it is something that we can do twice as fast. There's no construction involved other than modest rehab. We can do it twice as fast and at half the cost. And this is the housing that is most at risk in Minnesota today. And preserving the rents, these affordable rents, is extremely important. Rent is growing out of reach by the day. And right now, a full-time minimum wage worker can only afford $537 a month. Of course, they pay more because they're housing burdened. And if they're renting a one-bedroom apartment, they probably are paying $4,000 more than they can afford per year in rent. If they're trying to rent a two-bedroom apartment, they're paying $7,000 more than they can really afford to rent their unit, their home. This is the last slide again, just in summary. The bill proposal is $150 million for fiscal years 22 and 23, with NOAA added to the base in the out years, and the cumulative preservation potential is very remarkable at 10,000 units over the next 3 bienniums. And that's my comments, Madam Chair, and happy to defer to the next testifier.
We are joined next. Thank you very much for that testimony. We're joined next by Deanna Hemish, Executive Director, Central Minnesota Housing Partnership. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record. You are muted, I think. Yeah, you're still. There's usually, I've seen this happen before, and there's usually one other thing you have to press, because technically you're unmuted, but occasionally this happens. We'll go ahead with the other 2 testifiers and see if you can figure out the technical problem you're having. We are joined next by Chris Webley, the owner of New Rules.
Howdy, folks.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. Thank you guys for having me. Just wanted to check and see if you guys got the deck. I sent it a little late. So if you didn't get it and it's not loaded, it's totally fine. I'll wing it without it.
Please proceed.
The presentation, do I pull it up on my end, or does it get pulled up on your end?
Mr. Worth, did you receive something, and are you prepared?
If you can share the screen on your end, that would be ideal.
Oh, perfect. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Right, so again, my name is Chris Webley. I am the founder and CEO of New Rules. We are a benefit corporation located on the north side of Minneapolis. We define our work as a boutique real estate development collective. We have two prongs underneath our development division, development and activation. Much similar from traditional developers, we wanted to define our work out the gate by modeling a set of behaviors that we didn't see currently being modeled on the north side from a development landscape perspective. We operate what we call a live, work, play model, which takes life in the form of affordable housing. So we have an apartment building that's for artists and entrepreneurs on the north side. We also too have a shared workspace, an incubator space for these same entrepreneurs, northsiders, and business owners. And then we have a play component. So that takes form in our food and beverage program. We have a restaurant that we're opening up in the spring called Tap In, and a retreat space called Black Boat House, which is geared towards creating safe spaces locally in the Twin Cities for folks to retreat to. This is our lovely team. I would be remiss to not shed light on the folks who have put us in this position. The folks you see on the screen are all Northsiders, all kids who college educated and decided to come back to the North Side and be intentional about bringing their talents and gifts to the neighborhood to retain Black and Brown creators in the neighborhood. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the North Project and sort of how it's been able to help us and in our projects. Just sort of starting out from the beginning, historically speaking, all of our projects on the north side start out 50% underwater. Bell Lofts, this is a project that we closed with Greater Minnesota Housing Fund back in March of last year. It's a 25-unit existing loft-style apartment building that without Greater Minnesota Housing Fund and without the NOAA funds, we would have surely not been able to close this deal. Obviously, you can tell from your screen, I'm a Black man. And just historically speaking, we know statistics on somebody like me being able to purchase a $2.5 million building. Without the NOAA funds and the preservation of this project, we would have not been able to close this building due to the significant gap that ensued. And when we talk about other aspects of our project, so there's the housing element. The vision for Bell Lofts and how we were able to utilize these NOAA funds to get through phase one of the project was sort of what you see on your screen here. Our goal is to renovate all 25 apartments to this specification. We have a funny hunch that if you give the community a place that they can take pride in and feel safe in, that a lot can happen in it. And a big part of, again, allowing these NOAA funds have allowed us not only to close the appraisal gaps, but also to create a space that's accessible and for upward mobility. Bell Lofts is particularly being designed as a live workspace. So when we bought the building, it was 15,000 square feet of unutilized space. And of 92% of the families who live in the building who have families in the apartments, none of them are doing virtual learning in the midst of the pandemic. And so there's just a lot of low-hanging fruit that we feel that we can provide in this building for amenities that allow for upward mobility. So again, we thank you guys for having us, and we hope that you consider preserving these funds. Again, they're vital to Black and BIPOC developers like myself for us to acquire and preserve buildings, to preserve affordability throughout the Twin Cities. But they also too have allowed us to create valuable resources on the north side that are being used by the community. So thank you guys for the time.
Thank you for your testimony. Members, the Representative Howard, the bill's author, has arrived from his other obligations in the Education Committee. And so we'll revert to that, and then we'll continue with the testimony after. This is the chair moves that House File 443 be laid over. Representative Howard, before you begin with your bill presentation, you do have an amendment to your bill. Would you like to move the DE1 now?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would move the DE1.
Representative Howard moves the DE1 amendment. Can you speak briefly to the amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, the DE1 amendment maintains the intent of the bill, but utilizes language that matches up close to what has been introduced in the governor's budget to put some constructs around this plan to direct resources to preserve and acquire naturally occurring affordable housing.
Thank you, Representative Howard. Any members, any questions? If not, please unmute, and all those in favor of the DE1, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Now, Representative Howard, please proceed with your, do you want to present or go back to the testifiers now?
Madam Chair, maybe I could just offer a couple comments, and I apologize. It's that time of year where we're bouncing around. And I understand that there was some presentation background given, but maybe I could just give a little backstory about why this bill is important to me and where it's coming from. And then we can go back to the testifiers.
Proceed.
So members of the committee, as you've already heard, and we've heard about this issue previously, from an economic perspective, from a moral perspective, from an equity perspective, and from an efficient use of our state dollars perspective, we absolutely can and should be investing in preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing. And I know you've already heard some statistics and some background on the issue, but to put a story before you about how this is important to our communities all across the state. I was a council member in Richfield when Crossroads at Penn was purchased by a large corporate entity. They sought to put some countertops in and new carpet, make some investments in the property, but drastically increase the rent and change the rental requirements to displace the tenants. And this committee has heard stories in the past from our tenant advocates that were displaced. And I've spent a lot of time with those residents and thank them for bringing their story forward. But I just want you all to try to put yourselves in their shoes, living in a place for many, many years and just receiving a note slipped under the door that said, this place has been purchased, your rent's going to go up $500, you'll have to reapply, and you'll probably be displaced. And that's what happened at Crossroads at Penn, and to 750 units, over 2,000 of our community members were displaced. And our city was caught flat-footed. Historically, this has been seen as a real estate transaction, and government hasn't really had a role. But it has had a huge impact on our community. Not only were 2,000 of our community members displaced, over 100 children were displaced. 38 of those children experienced homelessness as a result of this. And keep in mind, this is just one financial transaction. 18 months later, I just want to briefly highlight a different story in our community. The second largest naturally occurring affordable housing entity was about to be purchased at Seasons Park. This was a 400-unit building that had 1,000 residents, including more than 300 children. In that instance, both myself and our mayor, Reagan Gonzalez, scrambled. Were able to connect with Aon, who was able to kind of pull a rabbit out of a hat and acquire Seasons Park. They've been able to maintain the affordability, been able to preserve and improve the facility for its residents. And it's been this incredible win for our community. And I just think about the impact of those 300 kids in particular, if that transaction had went differently and where they would be at today. But the reality is, the reason this bill is before us is because for every Seasons Park success story, there's several more Crossroads at Penn. NOAA sales have doubled in the last year, and we're seeing a significant loss. And frankly, it's time for the state to step up, and we can make a difference. And so I wanted to provide that story that underscores why this bill is before us, and also highlight that it's an area where we have a good alignment with the governor on this priority. And I would hope that we can have bipartisan alignment in doing something really important, really impactful, really efficient use of state dollars. And so again, apologies that we're kind of disjointed with our presentation this morning. It's incredibly important, and I'm grateful for the discussion this morning, and return it back to our testifiers.
Thank you, Representative Howard. We're going to try once more with Ms. Hamish and see if the technical problems have resolved.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Deanna Hamish, Executive Director of Central Minnesota Housing Partnership, and we're a nonprofit housing developer where we develop and preserve affordable housing throughout the central Minnesota region. As you saw from Warren Hansen's PowerPoint, the St. Cloud area has several properties in need of preservation. There's that's very common throughout the state of Minnesota. There are a growing number of investors with equity at the ready to purchase these rental properties when they come up for sale. This makes it difficult for organizations like CMHP to preserve these affordable housing options, as we typically don't have the capital as accessible. CMHP tried to preserve a property in the St. Cloud region last year. After looking at the property and running the numbers, we decided that that property was a good fit for our organization. By the time we contacted a lender, the property was already under contract by a for-profit entity. This was less than 21 days. The new owner was going to make a few improvements and then raise the rents. This affects those tenants, as those tenants are not protected from any large rent increases. The current housing market is extremely tight, and finding another affordable place for them to live is very difficult. This leaves families either paying more than they should for housing, getting on a very long wait list for affordable housing options, or possibly becoming homeless. CMHP has been developing and preserving affordable housing since 1993, and there are many organizations out there like CMHP who would like to preserve these naturally affordable housing options. However, the current rental housing market has properties under contract within an average of 16 to 51 days, and with an average sale price of $60,000 to $82,000 per unit. Additionally, many of these properties are in need of repair due to deferred maintenance. Gap funding for these renovations are needed, and make it extremely important to preserve these properties long-term while maintaining the affordability. Due to the quick sale of these properties, organizations like CMHP cannot preserve them. The ultimate goal is to preserve these naturally affordable housing projects and to protect the tenants residing at them and fix up the property so that they can maintain the affordability for the long term. However, organizations like CMHP cannot do this unless we have access to quick funding to help preserve them and fix them up. Thank you. And let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. We have one final testifier. We're joined now by Eric Anthony Johnson, President and CEO of Aon. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm Dr. Eric Anthony Johnson, the new President and CEO of Aon. And for those listening in, we specialize in both the preservation and creation of affordable housing. We roughly own about 6,000 units, and we've been at the ground level dealing with NOAA preservation issues. But what I really want to say today is really piggybacking off of the testifiers. In particular, Representative Howard talked about the experience in terms of what happened in Richfield. So let me just start by saying this. There's no question we're facing an affordable housing crisis in Minnesota. And the reason I say that is it has the ability to really impact our economic competitiveness. Without stable housing across the board at every income level, we will not thrive to our greatest potential economically. Acquisition of NOAA properties play a significant role in this space in terms of preservation, rehabilitation. That's really the reality, the challenge we're facing. So what we're really after is having the support to have the speed, not disruption of the market, but the speed and ability to compete in the market space to acquire properties to preserve affordable housing, because we know it's going to take a combination of preservation and new construction. So what we're really after is have a source that gives us the ability across the board, working with organizations like the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, communities, state, local government across the board. And to really get to that, we have to have a source that allows us to compete in that space. Otherwise, again, we're going to be having the issue impacting us continuously on our economic competitiveness. And that is something that we really have to understand. So what we're really after, Aon and others in this field, is just having support in terms of creating this fund to have the ability to move with speed. So I'm just going to end with that because I think the Warren's presentation laid it out. Representative Howard's statements really, define the issue. So I just want to close with that and be open to any questions. So thank you, Madam Chair.
So members, are there questions for the testifiers or the bill author? I don't see any hands raised. Waiting just a minute. Well, the testifiers and Representative Howard did such a good job that we have clarity. Representative Howard, final comments on the bill.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I thank you for the time spent on this bill. I think it's an incredibly important priority with an incredibly huge impact that we can have by making these investments for Minnesotans all across the state. And I just really appreciate your support and consideration of the bill going forward. And also, just an aside, I wanted to thank Ms. Harris from Aon for testifying today on what I know is a big day, a big game day. And so I'll end by just saying, go Zags, and would encourage passage of this bill.
Thank you, Representative Howard. House File 443, as amended, is laid over. The last bill on the agenda for today is House File 3548. The chair moves that House File 3548 be laid over. Representative Howard, please proceed with your bill presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here for this one at the start of it, so we're batting a little better at the start here. But this is an MHFA agency bill, and so I'll defer most of my comments. But it also, some of the key points, does deal with the same issue about the accelerating loss of naturally occurring affordable housing, coupled with the scarce resources and the slow pace of adding new rental units. It's raised concerns from stakeholders about the need to prioritize longer-term affordability for multifamily developments. And so that's kind of the genesis behind this bill, as I understand. And so in order to maximize the length of the time a multifamily property is required to remain affordable, this bill proposes amending a section of statute that makes land covenants restrictions invalid after 30 years. And with that, I would turn it over to my testifiers.
We are joined by Dan Kitzberger, Legislative Director, Minnesota Housing. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Dan Kitzberger. I'm the Legislative Director at Minnesota Housing. And I just want to say thank you to Vice Chair Howard for being willing to carry this bill on behalf of the agency. And also, while it's still timely, just say thank you for your work on NOAA preservation and House File 443. As you know, it's also a priority of the governor's supplemental budget. And so we look forward to continuing to work with you and our community partners on fine-tuning that language and getting it ready to go. As far as House File 38, this is an agency bill dealing with terms of affordability. So just by way of background, under the existing language, covenants and land use restrictions regarding the use of affordable housing developments will cease to be valid and operative at 30 years after the date creating them and may be disregarded. This means that if there's a 35-year affordability declaration agreed to at the beginning, after year 30, the property owner could disregard the declaration and operate the property as market rate. Some of you may be aware that covenants are the primary enforcement tool for affordability. We also regularly have situations where we have covenants without loans attached to them, and the covenant is the only way that affordability is protected. So for instance, a tax credit, land use restrictive agreement, or a declaration that remains on a property after the loan is repaid. Or I'm sorry, after the loan is prepaid. So in response to the requests of our community developer partners and to better address the statewide shortage of affordable housing, Minnesota Housing has expanded the use of 40-year affordability requirements, particularly in our multifamily loan documents and our tax credit documents. So an applicant for multifamily financing can now receive extra points through our RFP and our scoring process by agreeing to longer terms of affordability. So providing this incentive within our scoring system allows us to prioritize those longer terms while still allowing developers to submit applications that make other priorities and still compete for resources. So without this fix, the agency would need to track all of the affordability terms of all of our declarations and amend or refile those declarations probably around year 29 to preserve the long-term affordability that goes beyond that year 30 mark. And just as I would reiterate, we are regularly going beyond 30 years and typically are on 35 to 40-year affordability terms. So this we've just heard concerns from particularly our multifamily staff about that this would be difficult to administer and keep track of. As you can imagine, over the decades, there will be turnover in both people and systems who are responsible for tracking these documents. And we just want to avoid the chance that things will get missed and end up not getting the full extent of the affordability that was agreed to initially. And so with that, I think that's the overview of the bill, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have about it.
Members, do we have questions for the testifier or the bill author? I am not seeing hands raised. So Representative Howard, final comments on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would encourage support. Thank you for hearing the bill.
Thank you, Representative Howard. House File 3548 is laid over. Well, we made it through the 4 bills in spite of unusual schedules this morning. And I don't see any further hands raised for any other comments. So members, we will not have a housing meeting on Tuesday, March 29th. So next Tuesday, you have a little bit of free time. Our next meeting will be on Thursday, March 31. And seeing no questions or other items of business before the committee, we are adjourned.